go. Let me make sure we're live on Facebook. Cool. Are we ready to go? Are we ready to do it?
Yup.
Yes.
Yes, we are. All right, I'm turning down the music. Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the H3VR podcast, and coming at you live on a Sunday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific. We're doing this every week, everybody. If you don't know that by now, you should, because we've transformed from a podcast to a live video podcast, which is really fun. With me today, I don't know if my co-host, which was supposed to be over here in the ether, isn't showing up his avatar, but
his audio is there.
Oh God, he's coming as a voice of God from within.
Yes, I'm a ghost today.
And
before I rejoin you.
To my left, actually, our special guest, Anton Hand, the developer behind Hotdogs, Horshoes, and hand grenades. Can't forget about those. One of the earliest, I'd say, Vive and Steam VR games that was out there. One of the more updated things that's been on the store, and probably one of the best-selling things that's out there. And not only that, I'd also mention, it's probably some of the videos that we've seen about VR have been coming from H3, like just really cool gun tricks and reloads, and we'll get into those and show some examples in a bit. But hi, Anton, good to see you, man.
Good to see you too.
Howdy, howdy. Peter is his avatar's popping into the world.
Oh,
coming through. We'll see if he situates himself. Well, everybody, today is what's our date? Today is actually September 3rd. Wow, can you believe that? 9 months in already. We are on our 49th episode. Our 50th is coming, I guess, next week, which is really exciting. We did not know how long the H3VR podcast would go when we first started it, but here we are, transformed into avatars, speaking in VR. This is the final realization of what we wanted a podcast to be, is essentially to be able to interact like we would in real life. And we're getting there. It's really exciting. Anton, how are you surviving the heat? It's I know.
Central air and luck, I guess. I mean, there's a fire burning to the northwest of me on a mountain, which is a little nerve-wracking at the moment. I keep pulling open Twitter and being like, well, is Burbank burnt to the ground yet? Because we're next if that happens.
Oh, dude, seriously. For those of you guys that don't know what's going on, well, anyone that's not really in California, which half of our audience actually is in Germany. Hello, our German friends. It's really cool. California has been having this crazy heat wave this weekend where I'm in San Francisco, and San Francisco gets, it's cold usually, especially during the summer. It's around like 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, like 10 degrees Celsius, and it was so hot this summer, or this weekend, it got up to like 30, 40 Celsius, or like 110 Fahrenheit, breaking records. And they say climate change doesn't exist. And
oh yeah, it's been freaky here, because you step outside at 11 p.m. and it feels as hot outside as a summer day at noon, minus the sun. You're not accustomed to feeling that as sort of air at night. It's creepy.
And you're lucky. I mean, you're in LA. You guys are used to having AC in the houses. Like, that's not something that San Francisco people think about. Like, we don't have AC in the houses. We don't need AC for most of the year. I'd say maybe for a week or two. So anyway, enough about the weather, everybody. Let's talk about VR. We wanna go through a few bits of news this week before we jump into H3. Are we alive?
Yeah, we are.
We're gonna keep going.
There we go.
So first bit of news. Here, I'll make the big screen a little bit bigger. Pull it in so y'all can see. Windows mixed VR. I like that Road to VR calls it the Windows VR headsets and not mixed reality headsets. Windows VR headsets and controller bundles launch this holiday. Look at them. There's a ton of new headsets coming out. $300 or $300 to $400 with 10-track controllers, Steam VR compatible. So many good, cool little features here and there. But yeah, that's really big news. It seems like the market for that you're going to be able to play, the user base of players on Steam VR is gonna grow, hopefully at an exponential rate when cheaper hardware like this comes out. Anton, have you had a chance to, I don't know, develop on any of the Windows mixed reality headsets yet?
No, it's been one of those weird things that while I've heard about the platform for a while, I've talked, everyone who went to Vision was getting, I believe it was a headset from Acer. I haven't been able to get a ton of specific information about what their Steam VR support exactly is.
Right. How does that even work?
I mean, I assume it's just going to be, another, a sort of a driver shim into the API. But it's the questions that I have basically are, how do the hands behave when the controllers are outside of the headset's ability to track them? And
it's a very good question.
Just to sensors. Because especially for H3, you're doing a lot of interactions off in front of you. It's the same reason why something like leap motion wasn't appropriate for H3, because your hands really only exist when they're in front of in your head. And in the case of H3, we're pulling things off of our shoulders all the time. We're grabbing things down at our pockets, knowing that we're over them just by a haptic buzz and a sound, basically. So only time will tell.
Only time will tell. I think, and I was actually surprised that there are going to be Steam VR compatible headsets that aren't Lighthouse tracked. I thought that had to be a requirement, given that it's from Valve. It seems like it's not. It seems like if it's a 6-DoF control headset, it seems to be like a certain requirement for it to actually work, at least from Valve's side.
I mean, why would you, force only the Lighthouse things if it kind of still tracks you movement in the room? It's kind of,
Let's take a look through the headsets, guys. Like these, I mean, some of them look dorky as hell. Like, look at this one. Like,
Come on, it looks like from the 90s.
Yeah, but then you look at this one, it's like, ooh, a little bit more alien, a little bit more nicer. Actually, my favorite one, let me look it up. The Lenovo VR headset. I think that's the one that looks like polygons. That's not it. Which one?
Oh no, that's an Asus one.
That's the Asus. Okay, well, see, they all blend into the same thought here. All right, that's the Lenovo. Damn it. There it is. Let's take a look at this. And this actually I think is the most expensive one.
Wow.
Let's take a look. So check out the polygons.
$450.
Sorry, I'm like totally leaning away from the camera so that people can see behind me. So for people in the podcast, this is kind of the front of the headset has the same two cameras that all these Microsoft mixed reality headsets do, but they have it has a nice polygonated material in the front. Kind of looks like polygon art. But yeah, that's
which one will you get? Which one would you buy?
Me? I would like the white one, the Dell one. I thought that was really neat. Let's look at that. This one. I mean, it looks like an alien, but
definitely. What do you guys think about the fact that those headsets run directly with Microsoft Windows, right? You don't need anything else. That's like an advantage.
It's an advantage and a disadvantage, because I mean, I've heard, and I don't know if this is 100% confirmed, but you have to not only be running Windows 10, but be up to date to a certain point in Windows 10 to run these, which is a bit of a non-starter for me, because I run 8.1 on my work machine. It's what I like to do, and I don't like arbitrarily changing my OS to suit a single piece of software or platform.
Right. You're not about the Windows 10 life, are you?
No, not at all.
Windows 10 is more secure.
Yeah, but it's one of those, for me, the deal breaker is its ability to decide that it needs to restart for an update right now, regardless of what I'm doing. until they change that
cancelled
behavior.
it.
No, it still does it. There's still much.
I totally feel you on that. I've had Windows updates come up at the worst time before going live on multiple occasions. Like either I'm on a trailer shoot and we're trying to shoot mixed reality footage, and let's give it 15 minutes because it needs to update. And I mean, yeah, that part I really agree with. However, from what I've heard from other developers is that running Windows 10, there are certain features that they have in Windows 10 that just don't work in Windows 8 for VR in terms of like how well it runs, how well. I mean, but I guess having a Windows 8 machine that you're developing on helps you also test out like the 10 to 20% of users that might run across H3VR and make sure
honestly,
right.
I think the percentage is still larger, and this is this is a tangent of a topic, but it's I've run into several issues with H3 in the past that are Windows 7 specific that actually affect a non-trivial percentage of users. And the whole software stack is no longer QA'd on Windows 7 at all.
Right.
And I've been told as much.
Right.
So I've been told to tell your users to update to a modern operating system. And we forget that there is a sizable percentage of gamers that do not want to give up Windows 7, that it isn't a benefit to them to do so. And I imagine it'll be that way in a while.
Yeah, but it's kind of very bad regards security. And other issues, like I mean, it's just an anecdote. But the girl recently who I live with gave me a laptop and said, "Oh, it ran out of space. It's so bad." I looked at it; was Windows Vista, and apparently some jerk told her not to update because Windows are bad. Just keep your Vista going. And this OS, just basically wrote the locks on the hard disk, and it's terrible for people. People should be forced to switch to newer operation systems. I would argue for that. It's more secure, more features,
It definitely is. However, this isn't the topic at hand, so we're going to keep moving.
No.
I'm going to mention it has a 4-meter cable, these Windows VR headsets. That's pretty nice. And a 1440 by 1440 display. So,
which is standard.
It's higher res than Vives and Rifts. However, they're LCDs and not OLEDs. So, I'm curious. Peter, can you move your screen from here? This is your tablet? No?
Like that?
Can you, spawn your tab. There you go. All right, moving on. Let's talk a little, I guess, I don't know if I want to go too deep into what apps are actually coming out on Windows, Windows Mixed Reality. It looks like a lot, for sure, and, but it's not. It's actually not that many things. Like we have, actually, Big Screen, the app that we're in, is actually going to be on Windows Mixed Reality, which is cool.
Nice.
So we can have people joining in, and hopefully for our listeners and viewers out there, once Big Screen, they have plans on expanding the player count in a room. Once that kind of expands, we are thinking of having audience members actually be inside of Big Screen as well. Sitting here and also seeing the discussion. So that could be something really fun.
I do hope they implement the ability for them to throw tomatoes at us, though. That
would be awesome.
That seems like an absolutely critical feature. Minimum viable product right there. Tomatoes.
I like that.
I would kind of argue it's more donations, but
you can turn Bitcoin coins into things. And
tomatoes you can throw at me. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
This isn't something that I really want to kind of run past you, Anton. Rift Summer Sale drives record gains, highest Steam market share yet. So people that have been, following games on Steam Spy, there's a few other ones, VRL FG I think is another one that's just for VR games. They've just been seeing big bumps with users coming through because of the Rift sale at first about a month ago, and HTC I think about a week ago. Maybe 1 or 2 weeks ago, dropped their prices down to was it $100 or $200?
$200. The price drop was $200. Yeah,
to $60. Pretty good. I mean, there's been a lot of gains in users, and Anton, hopefully, can you add a little bit to this discussion in terms of that?
Oh, we've certainly felt it. I would say that it started even before the Summer of Rift sales were announced. There was the inherent sort of end of school summer bump,
right.
And then that sort of jumped on top of that. And I've definitely seen a far greater influx of Rift users comparatively, but some of that also has to do with our increased support of the platform.
Sure.
So,
as in launching on the Rift and supporting touch.
Oh, I mean, just in terms of like having more specific behavior overrides in the game and better supporting front-facing configurations.
Oh, got it. Okay, that makes sense.
The big thing.
So here, Road to VR has I guess, a picture from. I believe this is from Steam itself. You can see kind of how
it should be.
bumped. There's this. This is the little bump that we're talking about here. The Rift has been kind of steady going. I'm trying not to block the video here. And then there's a nice sizable bump as well on. So and actually, I'd love to see the stats on like how many Rift users actually use Steam VR. Like I do, but I don't think that everyone does. Like it's not something that's apparent from day one that like Oculus works with Steam. Like so
yep.
that's curious. And there's still a solid number of people on the Rift DK2 and I don't think anyone on the DK1 these days.
Well, I mean, 0%. It's just a puking machine, so yeah.
3.8% DK2. That's not bad.
It's still that high for the DK2. That blows me away. Well, then again, I've had people ask me on whether like, hey, I've got a DK2 and a Hydra. Will H3 work with it? I've got a DK2 and those Nolo controllers.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I actually got the Nolo. The Nolo is not bad. It's a very raw prototype, but
they don't transfer velocity information correctly into. They don't send it into Steam VR correctly. So if you're trying to throw using them, it doesn't work. But otherwise, all the button mapping works just fine.
Yeah, I just got it, and I need to still hack around with it. But good to know.
That's interesting. Yeah, seems like these controllers, Steam's and Oculus's seem to be the best so far. And
yes,
and as a developer, I would say, concentrate on those two before you would even think about trying to support Hydra. And whatnot.
We had the last. Exactly, we had last episode this great video where the guys hacked with a leap motion and some kind of Hydra controllers, a full Vive controller, which is also crazy. If you're going for that road, the games might not support full features, right? You kind of you cheap out of the proper deal and something might not work. So don't blame it on the developers.
That's right.
But yeah.
Moving on, I want to keep these stories short. Actually, around we'll do a 5-minute timer, unless it warrants a discussion and we're not agreeing on things, which often happens. This is okay. I'd say probably this is the most interesting piece of news that came out this week, and I want you guys to help me decipher what it actually means. Otoy, the guys behind all these light field renderings, they've done a ton of movie VFX work now and a ton in video games. Otoy wants to make light field rendering affordable with a supercomputing cluster that you get paid to be a part of. Hold your size back. Cryptocurrencies are interesting. I want us to come at this with a kind of overarching viewpoint of how what the hell can we do with cryptocurrencies and how it can apply into rendering pixels, essentially, right? Have you heard about this, Anton? I don't know if you've followed it at all.
I've seen a few mentions for it. I tend to be Captain Cynic with a bunch of these things.
Okay.
Just because for the simple fact of that a lot of these systems tend to be very like power inefficient.
Yes.
From a like they may be neat, but they're not environmentally friendly solutions to whatever their problem space is. And they're all undermined by the fact that internet throughput speed in the United States is terrible.
That's a very good point, actually. Our internet infrastructure is like light years behind other countries, including in Europe and Asia. So it's kind of funny that America
it undermines every single like real-time or pseudo real-time cloud rendering initiative. That even if we're talking about major city to major city connections, coast to coast, they're still atrocious.
Actually, if you go for the Lightfield article, as far as I understand, what they aim at is not necessarily real-life rendering, but they want to use the blockchain technology that, a lot of other companies use for different cryptocurrencies, and you basically get a token that you render things with. And what you do is you can basically render light fields and you do the calculation before you actually run the game. So you calculate for 2 days, for 3 days in a huge cluster, whatever, the light fields, and then it saves you a lot of performance while you run it live. So it's not necessarily about high-speed internet. What worries me about that is that...
Is it more about offline rendering then, in terms of just having access?
It's kind of, yeah, well, it basically pre-renders the light field of the environment. It's kind of baking light in a certain way, like very broadly speaking, right? But the problem is people need to use it. And with every of those coins, it's like, it needs to be a market. A lot of people need to use it, and a lot of people need to pay with it. And those coins are kind of dependent on where you use them, how to use those tokens, and they need a really flourishing infrastructure. So while Bitcoin certainly works, and Ethereum too, or Ether, the question is, can they do it? And I mean, it's great that they're trying, to make an article that mentions every bullshit technology out there, but...
Do you mean there needs to be a certain threshold of users that needs to pass for it to be a not a profitable, but also like a useful network to be a part of?
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, I guess anything that is a network-based product, like you need certain network effects to happen for it to be something that you'd want to be a part of. But I mean, I think the idea of it is really interesting. So, and just to summarize for listeners and viewers here, Otoy has announced a render token. That's the base form of the currency, these render tokens, and they're they're basically going to be paid to people that have idling GPUs, that are going to give their GPUs to the cluster, to the blockchain, so that you can render things for other people. So presumably you can then take those tokens and then cash them out. I mean, right?
Yes.
Like that's or even change them into other cryptocurrencies, which I think would be an easier form of conversion than it would be to do to cash. So it's interesting. I think I'm glad that people are thinking. Like, I guess CPU and other forms of processing have already pushed a lot of things up to the cloud, right? Like every single search you do on the internet is nothing is local in that sense. So GPUs are still really local. We're still limited by what GPU people are running, and this could be a form of like moving past that point and thinking about how computers start working together and actually rendering bigger things, especially if the demand for higher quality renders are there, which VR and AR are definitely going to bring. So
at the same time, though we're talking here about, we're not talking about up to the cloud search like a Google search, which is going up to a maximally efficient configured hardware stack. We're talking about like Joe Gamer with their poorly cooled, overclocked GPU.
Bro, I got overclocked 1080, bro.
And raising the ambient temperature in a whole bunch of people's living rooms by a couple degrees. Because their GPU is doing rendering for Joe Bob's Magical Forest.
You know what? The temperature in the room going higher being a concern is totally real. I've had a smaller room that I lived in, and my computer just heated up the room.
I used to heat my room with Bitcoin. My heating system fell out, and I used Bitcoins to literally not freeze to death in the German winter.
Oh, if the Russians had that, in those Russian summers, all they need to do is just mine some Bitcoins and they'll survive the dead winter.
Exactly.
Beautiful. All right, let's move past this one. We'll keep it up. We'll take a look at it and see what's going on.
Just a small notice. When I look down, it's not rude, but when you start videos, I need to look down because the internet in Germany is very poor, and I am.
So you don't look at it?
Connection.
Oh man.
Yes.
You should. I won't start videos. Don't worry, Peter.
Germany.
So, last week we talked all about photogrammetry. The week before we were talking about mobile AR. This week, Google announced their competitor. I'm doing the fingers. Competitor to ARKit called AR Core, which apparently is basically Google Tango's SDK, but with a couple things commented out in terms of the extra bits of hardware that you don't want to have. I don't know. That's probably an oversimplification of how it works, but Google has been doing Mobile Slam for a long time, and finally they're like, okay, this is when we need to actually push like this ability to everyone that has a single camera on their phone, at least Android, and that's updated to it's probably the latest form of Android, which not every phone has. So it's interesting. I don't know where this is going to go. I swear to God. Like, I've used a little bit of ARKit. We've talked a little bit about it. We don't know how it's going to be implemented, but we'll see over this year, right?
There is one point. One small point.
He's itching
Google
to
finally,
tell us, yes.
like, yeah, one small point, and then you can go on. Like, the fact that Google actually partner up with Samsung is totally a good thing, because it will launch on their Pixel and on the Samsung devices. That means that they instantly will, also reach millions of users. Like we complained last time, and now the Tango basically has no user base. Now they're changing it, so it's a very good step. Whether it will be good or not, I don't know. There's a developer should tell us. So, what do you think?
Yeah, let's turn it back to you.
I mean, the thing that I don't do AR work by and large. I don't do mobile work in general. It's just not my specialization. But as someone who's also a 3D artist, what leapt out at me and excited me about this was the light matching that they're doing to making objects actually feel like they're in the correct luminance and hue range, which has always been a huge turnoff for me for AR. And that sort of like, oh, look, that looks like a sticker that you've put over your phone screen. That doesn't even close to look like it's in the environment. And this was the first time something did in something outside of some hyper specialized tech demo. And so it aesthetically actually seemed interesting. I was like, oh, this is the first time I've looked at AR and gone, I might enjoy making art.
Right. Totally. Especially since they have the ambient lighting detection, which is so cool. Like using the camera, they try and estimate where the lighting sources are in the room and light the virtual objects accordingly. Like, that is neat. I don't think ARKit has that yet. That's cool.
No.
Beautiful
that
stuff.
Is super cool. So we'll see. I mean, let's put it on the back burner for now. Let's if you guys have certain things that you're working on, our listeners and viewers, let us know. I mean, we'd love to feature some of the ARKit and AR core things that we've seen. Before we jump into H3, I want to point back to the fact that when we showed this treadmill that Peter over here was on, it kind of went viral on Twitter, and I say viral in terms of VR virality, like they're on VR tweets don't go that big, but this one did. It has 400 something likes and almost 150 retweets, and it's Peter walking on this cool looking treadmill. Anton, I don't know if you saw this.
Yep.
You have?
Yep. Yeah, and I've definitely it's treadmills are something I've followed for a while now.
Are you still interested in them?
Not so much in ones of this size. Bigger ones.
Oh, you want bigger ones? Oh, I like that.
Oh, yes. Most certainly.
Me too.
I can't.
Me too.
We've been talking with some colleagues, soon to be close friends, related to such things. I can't talk about it right now, but it's very exciting. And but yeah, so it's one of those things that
you're partnering with a hamster ball, right? Like the big
absolutely. It's like a 14-foot wide hamster ball. We coat the inside of in butter, just because that makes for a more amusing experience for onlookers. So,
oh man, that'll be a fun one to be a part of. Keep your eyes out on Anton's Twitter page to find the hamster wheel that will come out in a few weeks.
And before that, help us with making 1,000 shares, likes, or whatever with this funny video.
You can drop a like if you'd like. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not gonna ask our viewers to get us to 1 million likes today, and we'll give a free giveaway. No, we don't do that here. Not on this podcast. All right, so let's move on to the main topic today. Anton Hand.
Yes.
You have made something cool, and I mean, how long have you been working on this? Let's just start there, like, because I think I've seen some videos coming from you. Like, it's been a few years now.
Well, it's been this is the first experiments video, would have been, I believe, February of 2016. If you go to my channel, it's honestly one of those. It's an emergent property of working on this project. But if you want to see a VR game being built from its very first test scene, you can see that on my channel. If we go all the way to the bottom here, pretty much.
God,
how many videos do you have?
Damn.
There we go. Virtual object experiments with Steam VR and Unity. One video up.
This
1 year ago. Nope. That's two. To the one up. To the right.
Banana.
One down. There we go.
What?
And before I started, Anton calls hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades a meat-themed dicking around with guns simulator. That's the official title and the genre of app that's out there. Let's see how it actually started with the video behind us. I have to mute it.
It's please, yeah, don't have the sound on. Please don't. My recording quality was terrible. This was done so casually because I seriously, when I recorded this, I thought maybe 50 people would look at it. And so I cringe a bit looking back on it. But
little did you know.
That's normal.
Little did you know. Oh, look at that. Those are cool models, man. That's really interesting. What?
Oh.
YouTube, what are you doing? Let's go back YouTube. I thought that I had when I had it full screen, I saw the Steam VR thing up here, and I was trying to move it. I was like, damn it, I can't have that on the stream.
Yep, exactly. I didn't know what I was doing when it came to recording a video like this. So.
You guys should look up Anton Hand is the channel name on YouTube. We'll link it in the show notes for people to find it. He really does. You do like once a week, like.
Yep, every Friday at 6 p.m. PST is the devlog. Initially, for the first almost a year of the game, it was weekly updates, and that was originally spawned by the fact that we launched into early access very, very thin in content, and that was in part due to community demand. I had originally just been doing a bunch of experiments in a scene, and as it was getting closer to the Vive launch, I started getting barraged by people being like, "Can I buy what you have?" And I'd be like, "I have a testing scene with 2 guns in it and some spheres. What?" And it was enough that it was sort of made that game time decision of can I death march out something early accessible in 5 more weeks? And so I didn't sleep for those 5 weeks, and we got it on there. But obviously, folks were with early access titles, certain gamers are like, nope, not touching it because it's early access. Others are just nervous that you're just gonna abandon it.
Right.
And so I committed early on to no, I'm gonna do a weekly update. I'm gonna demonstrate to you guys that the project matters to me and that it's going to continue to grow. And pretty much all those complaints went away in a couple weeks.
That's awesome.
One question.
Yeah.
We talked with us before the recording that your experience game is very popular. And why do you think it's so popular? Why were the people who wanted even to have those 2 guns and few bows? What makes it so special?
I think
do you have an answer?
I think what jumped out to folks immediately, even back then, is still what draws a ton of people to the project, which is compelling object interactions. Everything is physical in H3 for better or for worse. Each round going into and out of firearm is physical. I love this video.
Yeah,
and so because of that, I've taken a sort of an opposite philosophy to experience creation to what I've seen a lot of other folks do, which is that I tend to have a minimum viable environment for a space and put all of the resources and all of the effort into the actual objects that you're interacting with.
Yeah, it's way less about the skybox than it is about the thing that's in your hand and the thing that you're interacting and shooting with.
But regards to physics and interactions,
check out this reload, guys. He puts the shells on the bottom. I guess. Wait, how did that work?
He basically whipped the gun up enough that it moved the shells up, and they contacted the chamber, which loads them, and then slams the gun shut.
So hold up, Peter. So there's a lot of videos on YouTube, like we've been saying, of people just getting really good at interacting and reloading these weapons. And that, I think that it does lead to people coming back to it, is that there's a certain form of mastery when it comes to H3VR. You want to master your handling of a gun. You've seen videos of people just being really suave and stuff with weapons. That really does translate into H3, and in terms of how you do a cool little reload and you look like a badass.
Yep, and so it's one of the other things that separates in a big way my design philosophy for the game's interactions compared to I would say more arcadey shooters, which is that most VR games with guns are concerned with making you feel awesome immediately via the use of it, and shaping your interactions, shaping the way the gun moves around. Whereas in H3, it's much more of a neutral physics simulation with lots and lots of giving you as much agency and control over it as possible. But what that means is that everyone feels cumbersome to begin with.
Right.
And mastery that you see in these videos is hard-earned and quite practiced.
Yes, but is your goal to do it super realistic?
Well, I don't think that the term realism means much.
In what way?
I think people I think of it as a term akin to the word God, in that if you have a group of people using it, everyone has their own definition of it. And so there's a limit to how meaningful that conversation can be. So in the case of realism, what do we mean with that? Meaning, like, how to put it?
How far do you go? No. I think I totally understand.
How far do you go, but it's what properties of the of the quote physical world are even important to you.
Right.
Which ones do you notice? There's, in some really important ways, there's nothing real about this at all because of the core limitations of the technology.
I'll ask you this. I mean, with certain, I'm going to stop it for a second. With certain, let's say, sports games, especially even VR sports games, like, they recommend with some of these games that recommend, they're like, forget what you know about the sport and think and try and figure out this physics system more than it is about replicating what, sport that you were playing before. Would you say that, would you say that's similar in H3, or if you know guns, does that translate into actually using them in H3? Like, does that make sense?
1 second. Are you able to hear Peter? Because Peter's saying hello, and I don't think he can hear you again. So I think someone needs to click the microphone on their thing again. Sorry.
It's all good. This is why we do it live. I don't think I'd see him, but we'll just carry on.
Cool. But to answer your question, I think folks who do know firearms come into H3, and very frequently they need to know what buttons do, and that's their hump, and then from there they just run with it. I've seen it a number of times. I've heard it reported a lot. Because a lot of the learning curve in H3 isn't necessarily just a control issue. It's an understanding what the machine is doing. It's understanding how do I take this unloaded and non-readied firearm and a magazine and get it to the readied position and utilize it.
Yeah, and to that point, I think that's what I mean in terms of realism, is how much of the knowing things from reality translate into H3. So it is, based in reality in a way, for sure.
Most certainly. It's more to say, I don't necessarily like saying that realism is the ultimate goal, because obviously every single trick that this fellow is doing in here would, if not be impossible, be utterly implausible.
Totally.
Because of the way that things like friction work, and the mass of objects and things like that. But fair. In terms of the way that they're representing the way the objects function, I try to be as honest to the real life object as I can.
So, talking about realism, I think this is a perfect example of how realistic H3 actually gets.
Yes.
This is what we're looking at.
Frame rate, not. I'm always amazed that people who do this can even get like a 60 FPS recording.
For our podcast listeners, there's a player in H3 that took a gun, I think it started with a pistol, and added as many scopes as you can, and even an antler, what do you call it?
Yeah, it's Rudolph's antlers and Rudolph's nose there. That was from our Christmas update. I'm sorry, Meatmas update.
And it's to the point that it's like this huge, 2 foot radius, 2 foot diameter looking device that has 3 American flags on it, because fuck yeah, America, that's why.
America.
So yeah, you can go wild with it, you can stay realistic with it, you can play it as a gun simulator, you can play it as a silly shoot 'em up simulator, and with not real humans, but you have robots and hot dogs and things that you can shoot at, and barrels, of course. gotta have a couple barrels. Oh, and shoots confetti. That's
yes. There's a 12 gauge shell in the game called a Freedom Fetty.
Ooh, I
Freedom
like
Fetty, which has the red, white, and blue confetti and a great little derpy honk noise that plays.
Oh, I hear you again.
Oh, hello,
Delightful.
Peter. He's back.
Nice. Yeah, sorry guys. I'm really sorry.
It's all good. So yeah, these are really just really cool, fun examples of what people have been doing, with VR, with H3 in particular, and because user generated content, I'd say, is still pretty rare with VR users. Like, not that many people record video of footage of them or streams of them doing things, and so if it's compelling enough for someone to actually get good at it and then want to post a cool video and then it actually does really well, I'd say there's something to it.
And I think it's especially if you want to jump to the Akimbo reloads video. I think part and parcel with that on the sort of opposite side of mastery. I think one of the reasons that content with H3 has gone viral is that with physics active objects, the sort of dignity of having that is the ability to fail in all sorts of delightfully kinematic ways at whatever task you're doing.
So let's check this out, guys. Yeah, this is. Why don't you tell us what's going on?
Well, we've got like the two coolest handguns imaginable, two Desert Eagles, right? And it's zero gravity, and he goes to reload them in zero gravity, and friction and inertia have other things to say about this.
So it's pretty funny because the person, tries to reload the first gun, slides the gun through the clip, works fine. The left-handed gun, he tries to slide through, it doesn't work, and then the clip starts floating around in midair, kind of like how it would in 0G, and he's trying to reload this thing with two guns now, and it's just hilariously not working. I don't know if in audio form this video makes sense, but you got to see it. He gets excited and shoots himself.
I hope he doesn't shoot himself. No, he did.
That's at almost 1 million views. Like, that is really neat. I saw this on YouTube. I saw this on a bunch of different gaming posts on Facebook, Twitter, even. So it's hilarious. I saw it actually on Twitter first as someone saying, "I fucking hate VR," and it was this video, and I died laughing because you understand what's going on.
And the first two videos of H3 to like make it to the top of R-all on Reddit were both essentially failure videos. One of they had got, a popular YouTuber had done a video of H3, and in one case it was just another Redditor sort of mimicking that person. Had just basically, it was a sequence of failing at every single firearm. So like I pick up a handgun and I can't get the mag in, and I try to load shells in a shotgun and I fail at it. And that was incredibly compelling to people because I think it's indicative. It communicates so well the possibility space of hand-tracked VR. That like a platform has to be so advanced in terms of how it is taking your input to have the nuance required for physical comedy.
Yeah.
And so I think it was both a funny video, but also I think was really great at communicating to the general gaming audience. Oh wow, this is what hand tracking means,
dude, because it doesn't make sense otherwise. It has you have no frame of reference of what that means to have controllers and in your hand, that you're physically interacting with these objects, and that there is the chance of success or failure at every single interaction rather than a press X to reload, right? Like, so yeah, it makes total sense then that failure videos are going to be are interesting, funny, and also relatable enough to people that haven't even played that would make it go viral. So that's really fascinating. I'd love to.
But interaction in VR is a tricky topic. I mean, you have, for example, things like the interaction uncanny valley, where you when you design your VR environment too realistic, like you would necessarily lose performance of people and also their ability to believe in it. Now, would you say that the slightly goofy, realistic approach of those handguns and you're floating and trying to do it just diminishes this uncanny valley of interaction, so it just prevents it? Or
to that point, it's like when I was talking earlier about how the goal is not realism, even not when we're not in a 0G video like this. One big divergence from the real world I made week one, and never changed it, although you can change it now as a user, is that I don't use real gravity. Gravity is much lower, and I've manipulated the air drag on a number of things. And that has to do with the fact that in real life, when you drop an object, it's basically on the ground before you realize you've dropped it. There is no time left for you to like hesitate and try to recover from that air. Whereas in H3, I think I have gravity set to like 3.5 meters or 4 meters per second acceleration downward, which gives you this ability to, like, if you start to drop something, you can still catch it again and things like that. And a couple people have complained every now and again, but by and large, it tends to be the most pleasurable way. And I think
interesting.
It's
so that recovering from your mistakes, right? That you accounted for that, and that in of itself is a satisfying interaction that you can have. That's
most
really
certainly
neat. Okay. Oh, wow.
It's easier to balance things. And also it's a way of dealing with some of the limitations of the physics engine, in that small objects tend to fall through things when you use realistic gravity. Especially, I'm butting up against the limitations of the physics engine everywhere in H3 because cartridges are tiny.
Yes. I mean, you just saw it in the video with the 0G, where when he was trying to stiff the magazine inside the gun, it was kind of going through the material. Like, games are not having, or at least in Unity, I think it's not that easy to do very realistic physics, or things just cannot go through each other and stuff, or just collide and it's done, and there's force and bending.
I wouldn't want to blame that one on Unity. That's PhysX, and that's present in a number of engines. So there's plenty of things that I can blame Unity for. Just get me going. That one is not their fault. That one is just, and it's important when we talk about game physics engines in general. For almost the entire life of them, they've had to do things like, I need to move a 2-meter tall capsule that represents a player across a smooth ground. Or I need to do a vehicle with 4 wheels that sticks to the ground well with a nice motor model. Whereas in this case, it's like that AKM on screen there is probably 3 times the physics complexity of most vehicles in most games, and that's before we get to the magazines and attachments.
Exactly.
So what goes into that? I mean, hearing you say that, I guess I can't really understand where that complexity comes in. Where do you start, and how have you made these guns more complex?
Basically, the part of it is just having a complex enough physics representation of the shape of the gun, such that when you're hitting other objects at critical contact surfaces, it looks accurate. Most games fudge the physics complexity of their entities dramatically because it doesn't matter. You won't notice the fact that, like, oh no, when I put that on top of just that side part of the rifle, it didn't collide right. No one's going to notice that until you're actually holding it in your hand and it's covering most of your screen. The second part of it is many of these have pieces that move, and in the case of attachments, that you can essentially build a complex hierarchy onto any firearm you hold. So even if you're not doing something ridiculous like the Rudolph monster there, you know, taking a rifle, putting on several rail adapters, a scope, you know, an aim point, a flashlight, a laser, the physics complexity of that firearm is now about 5 times what it started as in terms of number of separate entities, trigger volumes, etc. Which is one of the reasons why this is single player, and this will always be single player. This is
why is that? I mean,
it's a tremendous, even before we get to the I would say there's 2 sides of it. One is one person holding 2 firearms, firing them full auto is in H3 is about as much as your CPU can take.
Because you're just every single CPU bullet that's being.
Oh yeah, I've got a very complex ballistic simulation in here that is doing ricochet, material penetration.
To build it yourself?
Yep. It some of it was migrated over from a prior non-VR prototype that I had spent just about 6 months just playing around with, making an interesting ballistic system that reacted to materials. In that game, it was actually had stemmed from an interest in the way that in all of these shooter games, we never simulate nor narratively reckon with the idea of collateral damage. When Nathan Drake is running through a town shooting bad guys with an AK-47, those rounds are going somewhere, and they're probably hitting someone's kid inside of a building.
Yeah.
So Drake is a monster, and yet that never gets reflected in any of our games and narratives, in part because we don't try to simulate it. The moment a round is no longer hitting an enemy or a cool exploding thing, it doesn't matter.
So another question, so maybe it's not very clear to anyone in our audience, like maybe some people never played around with game engines and colliders. So I will try to explain it in my words and correct me if I'm wrong. When you have usually your, let's say Counter-Strike, and you have your weapons. So weapons have some kind of box collider around them. So they don't necessarily have the shape represented. So they look like they are looking like an AK-47, but you just can't, you can't really hit the walls through them, and they don't have all those details and flexibility. Now, as far as I understood you so far, every part of your weapon is represented as a physical object in the game, which is compared to the car. The car is just a box collider, some kind of mesh, and it kind of looks fine, but there is no way you could really make fluids run through it in a physical correct way. Now, if some kind of fluid or some kind of other ways would go through the weapons, it could technically be very realistic, right? And that adds the complexity.
I'm still using a far abstraction compared to the real topology of these. Even our fast computers now would not be able to handle if I the draw mesh on that G22 there is like 7,000 tries. I would say that its physics representation all put together is like 800 or so. Oh. It's every surface that matters, but that's still far beyond the way that tends to ever be represented.
Exactly.
It looks like
because it's not needed.
It almost looks like you added a form of like the Rec Room avatars, and you actually now get to kill them and blow them the hell up because of how a non-violent Rec Room is. It's kind of satisfying.
These are my Mark II wiener bots. They are in fact still made of meat.
So that's why it's a meat grinding simulator, or a meat-based dicking around with guns simulator.
Indeed.
Tell us a little bit about what just came out. You said you've been working on a big update.
Yeah.
And this is the video for this is the update kind of devlog that we're looking at. Yeah.
Yep. This is part of it. Basically, the big thing for this one is that back last Halloween, we released something called Meat Grinder, which was I would call it a genre experiment. A lot of H3's scenes are what I would call genre experiments, which is we have these incredibly realist firearms that diverge in the way that they function from the way that firearms tend to function in games. What are the design ramifications of that when we slam that together with survival horror? What are the design ramifications when we slam that with something more arcadey? And so Meat Grinder is the survival horror version of that. And so the initial version, the initial mode was produced in about, what was that? Maybe 3.5 weeks. Back before last.
How many people?
Let's see. Me working constantly. 3 other members of the team working part-time on it. A voice actor. And a few ancillary assets made by other contractors. So,
do you finance your whole living through the game? Is it like the only job you have?
Currently, yes. Yes.
Nice. I'm very impressive. I think you're one of the lucky ones.
Oh, I'm aware of it, and I must admit it makes me feel a little guilty sometimes.
Don't think of it that way. Think of it, dude, you're working on a passion project that is doing really well, and you're clearly like you gain pleasure from working on this thing, and so is your audience. Like that's a good place to be in VR right now. I don't say a lot of apps.
It's my existence.
Do you have yourself a lot of experience with weapons?
I would say that I have a moderate amount as far as the scale operates for Americans. So
that's a good way to put it.
I was taught to fire a firearm initially by an uncle who hunts. Was